Welcome back to our studios here in Lahore. I'm Hamza Amjad. Now, Pakistan has decided to approach the International Court of Justice on the Kashmir issue after India revoked the special status of the occupied territory. Foreign Minister Shah Mahmood Qureshi says the decision was made after considering all legal aspects. Qureshi also briefed his French counterpart Jean-Yves Le Drian on India's illegal and unilateral action to change the disputed status of occupied Kashmir. He said the move poses a grave threat to peace in the region. Meanwhile, Pakistan's Foreign Office summoned Indian Deputy High Commissioner Gaurav Ahluwalia to condemn ceasefire violations by Indian forces. Now, India's lockdown of occupied Kashmir has entered its third week. More than 4,000 Kashmiris have been detained since India revoked Kashmir's special status on August the 5th. Indus News has this report.
The disputed Himalayan state of Kashmir has been turned into an open-air prison by Indian occupation forces for the last few weeks. A blanket curfew has brought life to a shuddering halt. Residents say they are fed up with the restrictions.
There is every kind of problem. Nobody can come or go anywhere. Everything is shut. There's a curfew. They are saying it is Section 144 to counter unlawful assembly, which is a lie. It is not true at all.
Indian occupation forces have employed brutal means to stop Kashmiris from demanding their right to self-determination, but they remain undeterred, and India's only response has been to maintain an indefinite curfew.
Indian Air Force Chief B.S. Dhanoa says that his force is still flying 44-year-old MiG-21 fighter jets when no one even drives cars that old. The Air Chief said the basic version of the Russian fighter jet will be phased out this year. Dhanoa says the Russians are not flying the MiG, but Indian pilots are still flying them. At least 110 jets were upgraded in 2006 to the MiG-21 Bison, one of which Wing Commander Abhinandan flew when it was hit by Pakistan's jets. Moving on to Yemen, where southern separatists have seized 2 government military bases near the port city of Aden. The separatists took over the bases in Zinjibar town a week after parting ways with the government. Earlier, the Saudi-led coalition launched 6 airstrikes on rebel targets in the capital Sana'a. The air campaign follows Houthi drone attacks on the southern Saudi city of Abha over the weekend. Meanwhile, the UN says 40 people have been killed and over 200 wounded in fighting since August the 8th. China has warned that the Islamic State militant group is reviving itself in Syria. Beijing's envoy to Syria, Xi Xiaoyan, urged the international community to pay attention to the threat. The Chinese ambassador says the fight against terrorism is not finished yet. Meanwhile, U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo says ISIS is stronger than before in some areas, but its capability to carry out attacks has reduced. Pompeo says the U.S. and 80 other countries executed a plan to defeat ISIS in the Middle East. Turkey has warned Damascus not to play with fire a day after a Turkish military convoy came under attack in northwest Syria. Foreign Minister Mevlut Çavuşoğlu says Turkey will not move its observation post in Idlib province and will ensure its soldiers' security. The Turkish Defense Ministry said the convoy had been sent to keep the supply routes open and ensure the safety of the observation post. 3 civilians were killed in the attack. Meanwhile, Russia says it has deployed soldiers in the embattled region. Syrian government forces stepped up military operations in the area 4 months ago, killing hundreds and displacing a large number of people. In Syria, rebel forces have withdrawn from the key town of Khan Sheikhoun and parts of northern Hama province after heavy fighting with Syrian troops. Earlier, war monitors said government forces seized the northern and eastern parts of Khan Sheikhoun.
Rebels say they have redeployed their fighters in the southern part of Khan Sheikhoun. Hayat Tahrir al-Sham group said its fighters still control towns in areas adjoining Hama province. Meanwhile, Turkish military convoy has gathered in rural area of southern Idlib. This comes after a Russian airstrike hit a Turkish military convoy traveling towards the front lines in embattled Idlib province. Turkish Defense Ministry said the attack violated UNCRA's agreements with Moscow. Moreover, Russian President Vladimir Putin and French President Emmanuel Macron discussed current situation in Syria in a meeting. Macron expressed concern on bombing by regime forces in northwestern Idlib province. But Putin put his weight behind the Syrian government and said Moscow supports the attacks in Idlib.
Now, for more on this, we're joined by Michael Arnold from Istanbul. Mr. Arnold, thanks for your time and welcome to Indus News. So, Syrian troops have forced out the rebels of Khan Sheikhoun in Idlib when the Turkish forces were advancing towards this strategic town. Do you think there could be any confrontation between the forces of both the countries there?
So I think, tensions are obviously very high right now. As your report mentioned, Syrian regime troops have entered into the northern and eastern sections of the town. They've yet to actually control it, but most likely that will just be a matter of time. The situation remains very fluid at this point, and so of course there's a distinct possibility that there could be clashes between the Syrian regime and Turkish forces. But I think this is something that both sides would wish to avoid if at all possible. Neither one of them want to get dragged further into conflict with each other. But at this point, I think too a lot depends on what Turkey is going to do with its observation post. At this point, there's an Turkish observation post to the south of Khan Sheikhoun, and as we speak now, there's no yet publicly available information as to what its status is at this point.
Well, Michael, we do know that the US has called on the Syrian regime and its allies, of course, to immediately halt all hostilities in Idlib province after an airstrike on the Turkish convoy. So does Ankara have Washington's backing in launching an operation there?
Well, I think statements of condemnation from Washington at this point are not particularly valuable, although they may prove to be a moral support for Turkey in some ways. The reality is, though, in this region, the U.S. has very little say and has no ability to act. Russia is the main player in the area. Russia controls the airspace, and so even if Turkey had Washington's backing for some kind of operation in the area, I don't think that would have a particular effect on the situation on the ground.
Right, well, we do know that the French President Emmanuel Macron, he was concerned about the bombing by regime forces in Idlib. And of course, Putin put his weight behind the Syrian government, saying Moscow supports these attacks. Well, does this minimize the chances of a ceasefire, do you think, in the near future?
So I think there's a number of things to point out here. So one, in theory, the Sochi agreement, which of course is part of the Astana process, is still in theory in play. But of course, as we're watching events unfold, that seems to be collapsing day by day. At the same time, if we're looking at the larger strategic issue in the region, Russia at this point can't afford, nor do they want to alienate and torpedo their relations with Turkey. This is something that they have put a lot of effort to do in recent years to try to boost their relations with Turkey. And so while they will continue to support the Syrian regime, most analysts say at this point that those objectives will be limited in order to not alienate Turkey completely.
Right, thanks for your time, Michael Arnold. Now let's move on to the US, which has warned Greece and all Mediterranean ports against helping the Iranian tanker Grace 1 after its release by Gibraltar. In a rebuke to Britain, Secretary of State Mike Pompeo called the vessel's release unfortunate. The tanker was detained in Gibraltar last month for carrying Iranian oil to Syria in violation of European Union sanctions. Now, the US wanted the Iranian tanker to be seized, but Gibraltar's government said EU law does not allow it to do so. Pompeo claimed Iran could use profits from the sale of the tanker's oil cargo to fund terrorist activities.
They're elite forces that have sown terror and destruction and killed Americans all around the world. And now they'll have, if they're successful, we hope that they're ultimately not, but if they're successful, they'll have more money, more wealth, more resources to continue their terror campaign, to continue their assassination campaign in Europe. This is what we're trying to stop. So it's
Now, earlier, President Donald Trump claimed that Iran wanted to talk to Washington after the vessel's release. But Iran's Foreign Minister Javad Zarif said Tehran is not interested in talking to the US about a new nuclear deal. Moving on, Germany and Jordan have agreed on the need for a two-state solution to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. This comes after German Defense Minister Annegret Kramp-Karrenbauer and Jordanian Foreign Minister Ayman Safadi met in Amman. Safadi has welcomed Germany's support for the solution. He also thanked Germany for supporting Palestinian refugees through the United Nations Relief and Works Agency.
In our discussions today, we addressed the Palestinian issue, and I briefed Her Excellency on the challenges we're facing in relations to Jerusalem, and we do value the German firm position in the support of the two-state solution as the only viable way going forward. We're grateful for the commitment that Germany continues to show towards UNRWA and supporting 5 million Palestinian refugees.
The German defense minister is also expected to meet with Jordan's King Abdullah during her visit. She will also visit the Bundeswehr soldiers deployed in northern Jordan as part of a US-led campaign against ISIS. Now, Sudan's military says the unveiling of a sovereign council has been postponed. A power-sharing agreement was signed between the opposition and the military last week, paving the way for a transitional government and the elections. The military said the council's announcement was delayed at the request of the opposition as it wanted to review some of the names proposed earlier. The ruling Sovereign Council will have 11 members, including 6 civilians and 5 from the military. The opposition coalition has to choose 5 civilian members. The agreement designates the Sovereign Council as the highest authority in the country. Now, in Italy, Prime Minister Giuseppe Conte has announced his resignation after weeks of political turmoil. He was addressing the parliament following a decision by the ruling coalition's League Party to present a no-confidence motion against the government. Conte has accused Interior Minister Matteo Salvini for sinking the coalition for personal and political gains. He described Salvini's actions as institutional recklessness, showing disrespect to the parliament. President Sergio Mattarella will now decide if he wants to call early elections or try to put together a new coalition. In Turkey, authorities have detained 220 migrants who tried to cross into the Greek island of Lesbos. Coast guards in the western Kanakkale province say they have conducted 5 operations to pick up migrants who attempted to cross the border. The number of migrants has declined sharply since 2015 after Turkey got €3 billion in aid from the EU. This led to Turkey exerting more control on migrants trying to cross into the European Union through its territory. Many migrants still attempt the short but difficult journey by sea, and Turkey remains one of the main launch points. While immigrants held in US detention facilities have filed a lawsuit decrying poor conditions and medical care. The suit, filed on behalf of 15 migrants and non-profits, seeks to represent detainees across the country. Immigrants said they're placed in isolation as punishment and denied recommended treatment and surgery. Some 55,000 immigrants are in the Immigration and Customs Enforcement Department's custody. ICE, which largely contracts with private companies and law enforcement agencies for detention space, has declined to comment. The suit cites problems at 8 facilities, including a privately run center in Adelanto, California, and Teller County Jail in Colorado. Britain's Prime Minister Boris Johnson has asked the European Union to scrap the Irish border backstop provision of the Brexit agreement. In a letter to the European Council President Donald Tusk, the British Prime Minister called the plan undemocratic. He claimed that Britain's Parliament would approve the Brexit deal if the backstop plan is removed. The Prime Minister proposed using the post-Brexit transition period to find alternative ways of keeping the border open. Responding to the letter, Tusk says it includes no realistic alternatives to the Irish backstop. He says those against the backstop in fact support re-establishing a border, even if they don't admit it. Earlier, Irish Prime Minister Leo Varadkar said the backstop provision cannot be changed. In Laos, 13 people died after a bus carrying Chinese tourists skidded off the road and crashed into a ravine near the northern city of Luang Prabang. 31 others were injured in the accident, and some of them were transported to a hospital in Vientiane. 46 people were on board the bus. The Chinese embassy in Laos has confirmed the death of 13 nationals. Investigations into the accident are underway. Over 9,000 people have been evacuated as wildfires rip through the Spanish island of Gran Canaria. The fire has entered the northwestern Tamadaba Natural Park, home to the island's oldest pine forests. Officials said the fires are advancing on 2 fronts in a mountainous area of the island. 16 helicopters and more than 1,000 firefighters are battling the 50-meter-high flames. Authorities said the efforts to tackle the fires were hampered by high temperatures and strong winds. Around 6,000 hectares have been burned till now, while several roads have been closed. Now, in a schoolyard in rural northeastern Syria, boys and girls break out into giggles watching Charlie Chaplin's pranks. This is a rare treat in the war-torn region, thanks to a mobile cinema roving through the countryside.
In Kurdish-held areas of Syria's northeast, filmmaker Sheru Hinde is screening films in remote villages. With just a laptop, projector and a canvas screen, he wants to spread the love of cinema in children.
The goal of this itinerant screening in the villages is for art to reach the children of the villages and the cities that do not have access.
His mobile cinema aims to introduce them to the magic of the silver screen from the early days of the moving pictures, which is something he missed out as a schoolboy.
We want them to discover international cinema since its beginning and to develop knowledge of cinema in their consciousness. And at the same time, we are showing American or French animation films that have been dubbed in Kurdish in our studios.
Old cinemas once showed American B-movies and Bollywood fare, but they lost their audiences and closed. In local mines, cinema is also tied to tragedy. After a fire ripped through a theater in 1960, killing more than 280 children, the elders now wish to give today's children a different experience.
I'm thrilled that cinema is coming to our region. I want my children to discover the atmosphere of cinema, to know what it is, to know films, and for them to reach their imagination, learn about the history of cinema.
Even some of the village's elders turned up to see the cartoon adventure, not having been to cinema in decades. Beyond their roving cinema, Hinde and his team dream of opening a movie theater at a fixed location. They acknowledge that it will depend on the end of war and return of stability to the country.
Governments around the world are grappling with how to tackle the plague of single-use plastics. Many countries have banned the use of plastics altogether and shifted to environmentally friendly materials. But for the poor in Indonesia, trash is equal to cash. More in this report.
Tons of plastic debris are discarded every year, polluting land, rivers, and oceans. Bangun is among several poor communities in Java, on Indonesia's most populous island, that carve a living from mining waste. Around 2/3 of the town's residents collect and sell discarded plastic bottles, wrappers, and cups to local companies.
To locals here, rubbish is like treasure. Treasure? Why? Because after we dry it up in the morning and sort it out, it will be converted into money in the evening.
After China blocked imports of foreign garbage earlier this year, the pile of plastic waste in Indonesia has mounted. Environmental NGO Greenpeace has warned that short-term prosperity from plastic mining comes at a high cost to the environment and public health. Indonesian authorities have stepped up the monitoring of imported waste to prevent the country from becoming a dumping ground for foreign trash.
We hope the government will make improvements around here, but we don't want it to close down this rubbish business. Local people have a saying that if it's closed down, we will fight it until our last drop of blood.
Elsewhere in Indonesia, authorities are fighting back against non-biodegradable garbage. Holiday hotspot Bali is rolling out a single-use plastics ban, while the populous city of Surabaya offers free travel to bus passengers in exchange for recyclable plastics.
The Russian city of Kaliningrad is marking the 100-year anniversary of the first passenger flight over Europe. An air show featuring about 50 light airplanes from all over the EU was staged in the Baltic city. Take a look.
The first European passenger flight landed on Davao Airfield in 1919, opening the civil airway from Berlin to Kaliningrad. This year marks the 100th anniversary of that flight. Pilots and airplane owners from Germany, Sweden, Poland, and Switzerland gathered at Davao to show off their skills and exchange stories.
Yeah, it's a special smell. And also this Mooney, it's very famous for this tank because this is not a special tank inside the ring. The ring is the tank itself. So this sheet of metal is just around the surrounding for the tank.
For some pilots, the trips from their home cities were lengthy. Detlef Kellinghusen, who worked as a pilot at Lufthansa for 40 years, flew for 5.5 hours with a tailwind from his home in Aschenberg.
It's a very slow airplane, yes, but I think the travel is the target, yeah. You have to travel, and that is the target. I don't want to have speed. When I need speed, I take an airliner.
Some aviators performed stunts in the air and allowed the public to take photos beside and even inside their aircraft.
Archaeologists in northern Peru have unearthed an ancient mural from the lost Corral civilization. According to officials, it is believed to be about 3,800 years old. More in this report.
A team of excavators have brushed away earth from the mural to reveal figures that depicts a toad wrapping its hands around the head of a man. The discovery was made in the Richama archaeological site. It talks about the importance of water in times of crisis.
A mural relief has been found that represents a toad that wraps its hands around the head of a man that would represent the announcement of the arrival of water. It has been found in the same building as last year when we presented one about snakes, and this would complement the message.
Excavations at Richama have been ongoing since 2007. They continue to reveal new insights into the ancient civilization like advanced city plan and architecture. The Corral is believed to be the oldest civilization in the Americas. It dates back to 3000 BCE, but little is still known about this ancient city.
It belongs to the late period of what would be the Carroll civilization. Carroll is 4,500 years old, and this relief would have been built in the late period within the archaeological site of Vicama in the Huara Valley.
The site is currently in an arid region of Peru, leaving many to conclude that climate change may have played a role in its demise.
Welcome back. Now, first up in the world of business, Chinese telecommunications giant Huawei, which has called a US move to blacklist 46 more of its overseas affiliates unjust and politically motivated. It said attempts to suppress Huawei's business will not help the US achieve technological leadership. Huawei called on the US government to end its unjust treatment and remove the Chinese firm from its economic blacklist. It dismissed Washington's decisions to delay a ban on US firms selling to Huawei by 3 months. Huawei said the US decisions would not have a substantial impact on its business. In the English Premier League, Manchester United have drawn their second match of the season against the Wolves 1-1. Playing at Molineux, the Red Devils took the lead in the 27th minute through French striker Anthony Martial. Wolves equalised in the second half by a short-range strike by Portuguese midfielder Ruben Neves. Manchester United missed a golden opportunity to take all 3 points when French star Paul Pogba missed a penalty kick in the dying minutes. The draw left United in 4th spot on the points table, and they will next meet Crystal Palace on Saturday. FIFA has revealed the 10 nominees for the Puskas Awards for the best goal of the year. Big names like Lionel Messi and Zlatan Ibrahimovic are among those nominated this year. Messi has been nominated for the award for a record 7th time. 3 female and 7 male players have been nominated. Liverpool's Mo Salah won the award last year for a breathtaking goal against Everton in the Premier League. Local teenager Cowley Vast has won the Tahiti Pro Trials of the World Surf League. He defeated Hawaii's Tyler Newton in the final round of the qualifying event. Vast finished with a score of 16.9. Newton finished 2 points behind, and the main draw of the Tahiti Pro is scheduled to begin on Wednesday. In cricket, key Australian batsman Steve Smith has been ruled out of the third Ashes Test starting at Headingley on Thursday. Smith was hit on the neck by England pacer Jofra Archer in the second Test and suffered a delayed concussion. He is likely to be replaced by Marnus Labuschagne, who became the first concussion substitute in Test cricket on Australia's second innings at Lord's. Smith was Australia's batting mainstay in the first 2 Tests, scoring 2 centuries and 92 in consecutive innings. Well, it's 31 degrees Celsius here in Lahore, but let's take a look at the weather around the world. Well, that was all I have from the news bulletin at the moment. Don't go anywhere. I'll be back in just a few minutes with the news headlines. Thank you for watching Indus News.